Good afternoon, everybody. We've still got some people joining at the moment, so if it's okay, we're just going to leave it for around about 2 minutes, and then we're going to kick off. So come back in 2 minutes' time. Thank you. Right, then, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the latest instalment in our monthly webinar series. On behalf of all the team here at Complete IT, I'd like to thank you for joining us. Today's topic is cybersecurity and what you should know. I'm Dan Scott from Complete IT, and for the next 45 minutes or so, we're going to explore together how the cybersecurity threats facing businesses have evolved over time and the ways in which everybody can protect their organizations from being hit by a cyber attack, whether you work in an IT role or not. One house rule for today before we start is that questions are not only wanted, they are actively encouraged. There's no such thing as a silly question when it comes to cyber threats, so please send them in and we'll cover as many as we can at the end. So first and foremost, a few special notices. October is the European Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Now, I appreciate in the UK at the moment that first word may be a little bit contentious, but I can assure you that the initiative that's being undertaken really is not. What does this mean for you? Well, this means that there are a lot of really, really valuable resources out there at the moment. So I would urge you to go and have a look at the campaign's website at cybersecuritymonth.eu, and also on social media, such as LinkedIn, under the hashtag of Cybersecurity Month, where there are lots and lots of organizations sharing some absolutely fantastic content that I really do urge you to go and make the most of. Please share what you learn, share it with your teams, share it with your friends, your colleagues, anyone that you can. When it comes to knowledge about cybersecurity, a rising tide lifts all boats. We're stronger together than we are by all knowing different things. So please, if you learn something that's really valuable or really useful to you, don't keep it to yourself. The other thing that I'd like to make a special mention of, hot off the press as of yesterday, our absolutely brilliant National Cybersecurity Centre. Appreciate at the moment not all UK public bodies are regarded as being that efficient or effective, but this one definitely is, in my opinion. And our brilliant NCSC have published their 2019 annual review yesterday. So you can go to their website, ncsc.gov.uk, and it'll be all over the homepage, I'm sure. If not, the direct link to the report is down at the bottom there. Here's an idea for everybody of what to do with this. So, okay, I've given you a link to a report. Now, what can you use the report for? Anybody who's listening that might be a member of a leadership team of a business, why wouldn't you distribute a copy of this report to all of your board members or team members that you meet with? And in your next meeting, why wouldn't you put an agenda item on there to discuss what people think that they found that perhaps they didn't know, perhaps they were unsure of, perhaps had underestimated from reading the report, and then come up with some plans about what you can do off the back of what you've read. When it comes to cybersecurity, and definitely in the age that we live in today of data privacy, having evidence that as an organization, you have formally tabled at least a thought process and a discussion around the cybersecurity processes that can affect your business no matter what it does, it puts you in a very strong place should you ever be called to question as to what defenses and what structures and processes that you put in place if the worst should happen. So they would be an idea from me. Please share it, use it, discuss it, do something. It's a great report. I had a quick read of it yesterday. So let's go back in time. It's 1999, end of January, and the Happy 99 virus came out. And the Happy 99 virus had no ransom. It had no encryption. It didn't steal data. It didn't delete data. It didn't do anything, really. It gave you a picture and an animated frame of some fireworks, and it wished you a happy 1999. There were, of course, at the time, there were worse examples of viruses that could do a lot of damage to a computer. So I have picked a bit of a hyperbolous one. But the theme of what I'm trying to get at here is that compared to where we are today, things were much different. The number one differentiation that I can make is that malware and viruses were not made for a profit. They were instead made to do what you see on the screen, or what that specific virus was meant to do on its screen. Fast forward to today, I think there's one major difference, not only in how viruses and malware are written and their effects, but there's a difference with us. And the difference is that our lives are online through combinations of social media, through online services such as banking. We live in an online society. There is a saying that says that the internet gave us access to everything, but it also gave everything access to us. And that's incredibly true at this point. Our personal information became a tradable currency amongst criminals and amongst legitimate businesses. There's a reason if something is free, and the reason if something is free online is because you are the product and you are not the customer. And of course, the very famous example in the last probably now 18 months, 2 years, has of course been Facebook and what it does with the data that it collects from running a free social network. Getting hit now has a financial and reputational impact, and I would argue the reputational impact can far outweigh the direct cost of the financial impact. And we are all at risk. Gone are the days where the excuse of no one will target me because I'm not, or my business is not big enough to become relevant to become a target. That isn't valid anymore. Really, when it comes to the viruses, malware, and data disruptions we read about every day, no one was targeted. Everybody was targeted by the same breath because email campaigns were sent to hundreds, thousands, millions of recipients in the hope of receiving clicks that would then generate incidents and encryptions and ransoms. Hacking has also become an accessible tool to all through things such as the dark web and online hacking forums. Getting access to malicious code and malicious software has become an equal opportunities endeavor to anybody. You no longer have to have the intelligence in order to be able to write it. You can simply go and contract it, pay a revenue share to the people that wrote it, and go out and try and generate yourself some illegal money from ill-gotten gains. Also, the way in which money is being extracted is increasingly becoming really not that technical. To have a look at the box in the bottom left, which talks about the city of Burlington in America falling prey to a $500,000 phishing scam. So an email that came through that purported to be from somebody it wasn't, that generated a click and ended up with $500,000 leaving the bank account of the city of Burlington. That's almost comes down to marketing. Sending emails that provoke emotion and generate clicks isn't really what you would have associated with writing a Happy 99 virus that was attaching itself to emails and web posts in the hope of downloading a piece of software that brought some fireworks onto your computer. It's altogether extremely different. Having a look at the causes of breaches today and infections today, this is a piece of research from the Ponemon Institute. And the first thing that caught my eye was halfway down the list is advanced malware. And so actually what's up at the top of the list? It's the simple stuff that's most likely to get you into trouble. In fact, the entire bottom half of that list, if you have a quick read through, are really the quote unquote techie attacks. They are things like SQL injections, which in English means pushing code into a database that forces it to give you more information than you were intending. It's cross-site scripting, so running scripts between websites, so you think you're doing something and actually you're doing something else. The stuff up at the top, which is having far more impact, I mean, especially obviously the number one, which is phishing and social engineering, that we've just covered with our City of Burlington breach, are really the far, far simpler The reason for that is, of course, like anything, the simpler the action, the more likelihood you have of getting a result, and the easier and cheaper it can be performed because you don't require complex skills. So there's a reason why people are going after the easy ones. What happens when you get hit? It's safe to say that none of these are good news, because why would they be? Number one, of course, we have direct financial impacts. It's coming in courtesy of Vance and Bourne and Continuum from a research paper that they wrote earlier this year. So direct financial impact, the cost of dealing with the issue, the cost of getting the mop and bucket out. I'd argue that number two is a far bigger impact. So it's the time and effort of dealing with the issue. I'd argue the one thing that all of us here today would argue we haven't got enough of is time. And yet, funnily enough, of course, it's the same thing that we all have exactly the identical amount of in a given day, week, or month. We all start with 24 hours in a day and we haven't got enough. So what's going to happen when, for example, the weekly course of your business, you can't focus on growth and service and your clients and customers and prospects? Instead, you're focusing on a damage to your reputation and a loss and a productivity impact on your business as a result of systems being unavailable as a result of a cyber attack. So I'd argue that that is a far bigger impact. So as you can see, when things do happen, it's really not very nice. Where's my summary on all of this? My summary is that once the virus told you it loved you with the I love you virus, it told you to have a happy new year with happy 99, or one of them wanted you to have a chocolate chip cookie. Now, rather than presenting themselves and annoying, disrupting, they stay quiet, they steal data, they exploit, and they extort. So for example, we're extorting money directly with cryptographic attacks and ransoms. We're stealing computing power with crypto miners. So you may have heard of cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin. Bitcoin is now incredibly valuable, even though it did take a dip around a year or so ago. It's still, considering you don't have to fork over real money to obtain it, an incredibly valuable source of funds. Bitcoin, is mined by getting machines to undertake tasks. So what happens when you can infect thousands of machines worldwide with a piece of software that does that mining on your behalf? You can A, slow those computers down and really annoy the people that use them, and B, you can generate cryptocurrency. And lastly, data theft and data exploitation, which gains you money indirectly. So for example, stealing credentials or stealing data from people in an attempt then to get them to pay to get you to remove it from your system. So we've moved from attack and disruption into exploitation for financial gain. That would be my big take on where we are compared to where we were. So that's enough doom and gloom. How can we beat this? Well, today I'd like to go through 3 things with you that we can all do, whether we are IT professionals or not. It doesn't matter. And I'd like to start with the dreaded password. Now, it's safe to say that nobody likes passwords, no one. You use commonly, I'm going to take some generalizations here, you use the same one everywhere. Occasionally, you pop an exclamation mark or a 1 at the end if you're really feeling secure that day, or that the website just won't let you put the one you want in because it just consists of some letters and numbers. Now, have a look at some of the statistics here. Now, the worrying thing, I will prefix these, is that this is a couple of years old. And so that means with the power of computers going up, these times will have gone down. So in order to crack a very simple password, 4 characters in 1.36 minutes, or if they're all lowercase, then in under a second. Now, some people might be looking and thinking, okay, 8 characters, that's okay. We've got 2.1 centuries on there, can't have come down that much. So I don't see my 8 character password 1, for example, as being a problem. Unfortunately, there is more to it than the old adage of just looking at password lengths, as maybe we used to do probably like 5-6 years ago, perhaps. For example, here is a real-life attempt of what's called a dictionary attack. So really simply, it's a computer package that has within it hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of known easy combinations of passwords that come from a dictionary. So we've got chocolate password 1, soccer, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, etc., that people may use. And these programs can just sit there and pump these into systems, and perhaps hundreds at a time, if not thousands, depending on the power of the system that's running the attack, or of course distributing it worldwide by getting other computers that you've infected with viruses that then do your bidding for you, which in tech speak is what's called a botnet. You might have seen occasionally in the news. So by getting these computers to perform these attacks for you, eventually one is going to get through. Now, we might think it would take ages to put these passwords in, and occasionally Things like Windows will stop you if you put your password in correctly too many times. It will then prevent you from putting another password in for, say, 15 minutes. But over a 24-hour day, 7-day a week, computers don't need to take a holiday and they don't need to stop. The odds of it getting in are increasingly, become very, very high as time continues. Once a password has been breached, all the services that use that password that belong to the person whose it is, if it's yours and somebody guesses your password as a result of a dictionary attack, they can now get into everything that uses that password if you've used it across multiple systems. It's like having some sort of master key to your online world if done badly and you use the same one in multiple places. Or, of course, if a service that you use has its data breach. So, for example, around 5-6 years ago now, LinkedIn suffered a massive data breach, huge data breach. Now, if you were using that email address and password that you used to log into LinkedIn was being used all over the internet and across all of your services. By hackers gaining the data that was available in one place, they've now been able to get in absolutely everywhere, including into things like your work email. So when you get the fake email asking you to log into your bank and urgently regain access to your account or pay an invoice that's overdue for a service that's going to get cut off, you click it and you put your details in and you're using that same password in other places, the hackers now have access to log into absolutely everything that belongs to you. So passwords are an extremely, extremely dangerous thing. So how do we fix them? Going sort of left to right here with sort of good on the left and best on the right. We know that passwords are bad. First of all, never use the same password twice. Never do it. Don't use derivatives of it. Don't put numbers at the end to make it different. Don't put exclamation marks or dollar symbols or whatever you want to put at the end to make the same password and try and change it to be different. Don't do it. Now, the first thing that will be in the back of many of your minds at the time is, well, how on earth am I meant to remember it all if I've got, say, 20 different passwords across 20 services? I'll never remember them all. In there comes a password manager. So what's a password manager? There are now lots of them available. We're going to go into brands today because it's not what today is about, but it's a piece of software that stores details of services and then your usernames and passwords for those services. Usually they will take the form of a little plugin that lives in your web browser and an app that lives on your mobile phone, because they're commonly the two places that you're going to be signing into products, services, and applications when you're on the move and when you're on your PC. So what's going to happen is when you go to, say, facebook.com and you go to log in, the password manager, there's a little box at the top of your browser. It's going to say, I've got a password for that. Would you like me to fill it into the website for you? You say, yes, please. Then you never need to remember your passwords. Equally, they feature the ability to automatically generate secure passwords for you. So, for example, I don't know any of my passwords to log into my online services. They were all generated by my password manager. They're all very long, random strings of letters, numbers, and special characters, uppercase, lowercase, that have been created for me. I don't know what they are. And the password manager automatically fills them in. Equally, when I'm on my mobile, there's an app on the phone. I can copy them and paste them into whatever it is that I'm trying to log into. Now, there is, of course, an element of inconvenience in here. So let's get it out in the open. Of course, there is, and with many times with security does come a bit of inconvenience. It's the price for being secure. So in this case, yes, if I'm out and about, I'm using a computer that's not mine, and for whatever reason my phone battery has died, I won't be able to get access to my passwords in order to be able to log in. However, I also know that nobody else can either. So it's a very strong place to be. And the last one is using multi-factor authentication. So what does that mean in English? Multi-factor authentication is where you go to log into a service. We'll carry on with the Facebook motif. So you log into Facebook, you put your username and your password in. And the next thing it's going to do is then say, right, I need a second form of proof that you are who you say you are. Now, that usually comes in a couple of different ways. Most commonly is either via an app on your mobile phone, if it's a free app, that will randomly generate strings of 6 numbers and will refresh those 6 numbers around once every 90 seconds. You will then pop those 6 digits as they currently stand into the web page, and then it says, right, I now know you are who you say you are, and you're not just somebody who happens to know that person's username and password. Another way that the second factor of authentication might come in is via a password through a text message. I would air caution against using text-based two-factor authentication. There has been a number of recent cases of a technique known as SIM swapping, which means that actually to bypass or to be able to log in as somebody who is using text messaging as a second form of proof, it can be quite straightforward to call up their mobile provider, say, hi, I'm Fred Bloggs. I've lost my SIM card, or it became damaged. So I've gone into one of your shops. I've purchased a SIM card, and I'd like you to move my account over or enable the SIM card onto my telephone number, please. Go through some security questions, and you'd be amazed what people put on their social media profiles these days. And so things like mother's maiden names and place of birth and place you went to school might be easier to find than you think. And before you know it, fast forward a couple of hours or so, and you've got a live SIM card that is able to make and receive calls and text messages as the person's number, and then of course receive text messages with that second form of authentication. So I would focus on that one. I would stay away if possible. So with that second form of authentication, so with that app sits on your phone will most likely either have a fingerprint reader, it will have a face unlock, or even a PIN code. Whatever it is, means someone's got to have your phone, they've got to be able to open it in order to be able to get that second layer of authentication. It is a lot better than just relying on your password. So with two-factor authentication enabled, the next time you get an email from a service that you use, be it email, be it Gmail, Facebook, whatever, LinkedIn, or something far more important like your bank, when you get a failed login attempt coming through saying someone tried to log in as you, and you think, well, that wasn't me, then you know that actually, well, they can't get in as me anyway. Even if they did know my password, it's a bit useless because they haven't got my phone, they haven't got the code that's on there, and they won't be able to log in. So that's multi-factor authentication. Just a point to pick up before we move on from passwords. I have heard people unfortunately claim that things like they were hacked because somebody has logged into their email account and they've used it to send out a load of emails to trusted contacts with fake links to please pay this invoice. Of course, it's not from you, it's from them, and people you know and do business with may be becoming unknowingly defrauded by somebody they regard as being you. Unfortunately, it doesn't count as hacking when somebody just logs in as you into a service. For example, Office 365 doesn't get hacked when somebody logs into your account using your username and your password that they have gained by illegitimate means. That just means that it was doing what it was told and they logged in. By having a second point of authentication and by not using passwords, the same password everywhere, you really mitigate the chances of that happening. Moving on, our next one is patching. What does patching mean? Patching means updating software to the latest versions to remove bugs and known security vulnerabilities that the manufacturer of that piece of software has found. Patching also means not having software that is no longer supported by the manufacturer that made it, because by proxy of it not being supported anymore, that manufacturer will not be releasing any further patches for it because they consider the software to be defunct and shouldn't be used. The very poignant example of this is the 14th of January next year. I would say 2020, but that sounds further away than saying next year. I don't know why, I'm not quite used to it being 2020 yet. And on the 14th of January next year, Microsoft Windows 7 will go end of life. And on that day, post forwards, Microsoft will not issue automatic updates to Windows 7 unless between now and then they change their policy, which they don't seem to have wanted to do quite yet. So I don't think that is going to happen. So patching is extremely important. Let's pretend for a moment that I am a virus writer. I am writing malware. How do I know where to target? How do I know where to write the code? How do I know what to go hunting for? How do I know how I'm going to be able to mine cryptocurrency or steal your data or encrypt your data and ransom it back to you? Where can I find the holes in order to infect systems? Well, it's really, really easy. I actually look to the manufacturer of those systems. They give me the guides that I need in order to craft malicious code. And they do that by issuing updates. So we can see here, it's a very recent one this month, about a week ago, or actually earlier this week, that Microsoft have issued a warning because they have found a hole in the piece of software that updates Windows 10 to the latest version of Windows 10. You download it, Windows Update Assistant, and it downloads the major revisions of which Microsoft released 2 a year. So they found a hole in it, and Microsoft have issued an update. And so there are two ways of fixing the hole. You either A, uninstall the Windows Update Assistant. You can find it in your add remove programs. If you want to do that, check it after this webinar. Or you can go to the Microsoft website, find the update, download it and install it, and it will patch the vulnerability. Now let's say that again, I'm that virus writer and I want to know how I can infect your machines. How do I do it? Well, really simple. Microsoft have issued an update. I reverse engineer that update. I see what it's doing. I see the hole that it's plugging. That then tells me how I can engineer my code in order to deploy something that's going to be able to find that hole. I also, unfortunately, know that very few people will have installed this update or uninstalled the software, because the statistics on patching are still extremely low. People don't do it. We've all had that annoying pop-up down near the clock somewhere that says, hey, I've got an update available, please update me. And you're like, no, not now, I've got the program open, or I can't be bothered. Or you're going to want to restart my machine and it's really not convenient right now. So you just move on from it. It keeps asking for weeks and weeks and weeks. That's where they get you. And that's how they find the holes in the armor. Let's have a look at this in a practical example. This is the timeline of the Wannacry virus from 2017. The Wannacry virus, for those that may remember, is the one that impacted numerous NHS primary care trusts around the country. Looking, we don't need to, most of the graphic we don't need to look at. What first focus on is March 2017, so 2/3 of the way along. And in the top there, Microsoft releases SMB updates for supported OSs. What does that mean in English? It means that Microsoft released an update for a really nasty hole that, of course, we know came from something that the National Security Agency in the US had been using for years as a way of breaching systems and kept it quiet, and then it came out. So they issued a patch. That patch fixed the problem. That patch also then shows all the virus writers how to write their viruses. Then we fast forward to May 2012. What happens in, sorry, May 2012, May 2017. What happens in May 2017? So 2 months down the line, possibly, the Wannacry outbreak begins in the NHS. So between March and May, there has been a patch sat there on Microsoft servers that, had it have been installed, Wannacry categorically would not have impacted the NHS. All they had to do was install the free piece of software that came from Microsoft, and it would have all gone away. But what's even more annoying is that some primary care trusts got hit by Wannacry twice, because they restored their backups of their systems that still weren't patched. They still didn't patch them, and then they got hit again. So moral of the story is, without the updates, you are an open target for the virus writers. Just to pick up on a point that I made earlier, you might notice on May the 13th, Microsoft released patches for Windows XP and 2003. Those are considered end-of-life operating systems and they are no longer supported. However, Microsoft did release an emergency fix for them, because I guess a bit of corporate social responsibility, and knowing that they had to be able to provide a fix for something that was such a bad problem. However, they did not release it as an automatic update, because the automatic update service for those operating systems is switched off. So they released it as a way you could download it from the website and install it. And I'm sure you can probably know in your head just the percentage of people running Windows XP or 2003 that did that. It's not very many. So how do we fix patching? First and foremost, you've just got to do it. There's no substitute for patches. You've just got to do it in some way, shape or form. Preferably, it should be automated. Don't offer yourself a choice. Have something, a mechanism that allows you to automatically install patches. For example, with our complete endpoint security service, we are patching both Windows and a whole raft of third-party applications such as Flash, Java, QuickTime, WinRAR, you name it, the little bits of software that sit on computers that quite often pop up by the system tray all the time, down in the clock, and ask you to update them and get really annoying. This will mean, unfortunately, by doing patches, even if you're doing it in an automated way, or you're just going and opening Windows Update periodically so that you can install the latest updates that are available, this does mean you're going to have to reboot. So I'm really sorry about that. But it's a pain. It's a pain if you work in IT as well. Not to pay when you use a computer that's administered by IT. I do apologise, but it is a necessary evil in order for those software patches to apply. As a point of comparison, I think, to patching, around a year or so ago, my wife received a notification from her car manufacturer that said they had found a problem in the airbags in the model of car that she had at the time, and they were recalling them all. So you had to call up your dealership and you could have a free repair, and you're going to be able to go and get those airbags sorted. Now, unsurprisingly, as we all would in that circumstances, one of the first phone calls that she made was to the local dealership, book the car in and have the airbag switched. Patching is exactly the same. When you see that annoying little pop-up down at the bottom of the screen that's asking you to update me to the latest version, it could well be that they found a really, really bad security flaw in their software and they're offering you a free way of fixing it. There's something really, really dangerous that you are exposed to, but actually for a little bit of inconvenience and no cost, you can have that fixed for you. So please try and change the culture a little bit when it comes to updates being laborious. If your software requires older versions, we've all had it, we've all seen it, I'm sure, at some point, where we have to have a particular version of this or that thing won't work. In those circumstances, please talk to those software providers. Talk to them and implore and impress upon them the importance of keeping your business by allowing their software to work with the latest versions of whatever the dependency is. because it really is exposing you to danger by being reliant on having to have, say, a fixed version of Java would be a classic. We see that quite a lot. In order for something to work, it's not a very good place to be. Next up, we're going to look at email. Now, we ran a whole webinar on patching, on phishing earlier on this year. So I do urge you to go and have a look at that. They're available via our website, and because that's going to go into more detail on this particular section, because it is really, really important. When we go back to our types of attacks from the Ponemon Institute that SMEs have reported in their survey, phishing, of course, and social engineering, so crafting something that makes people click, was number 1 in the list. Over 53% of respondents have experienced it. So statistically speaking, this is the one that's going to get you in trouble. So this is the one that you probably need to focus on the most, I would argue, at this current moment in time. So what happens with a phishing email? First of all, they're going to be crafting something that has this sense of urgency, that employs a response, that tries to get you to react. It tries to get you to panic a little bit and hope that the problem is going to go away. You need to be looking for emails that don't seem right. That's not always easy. And unfortunately, the more that time goes on, the more these emails are really well crafted. Gone are the pidgin English, gone is the coming from a bank you've never banked with in a country you've never lived in. It's becoming increasingly hard to see and to spot what's going on. And so you really do have to take more time. I would say always, if you don't know or you're in any doubt about an email, call the person who it purports to come from. Don't take it at face value. Get on the phone and ask them. The worst happens is they say, yes, it's me, and the invoice is really overdue or whatever, and you have to do something about it. But I would say, if you ever find yourself in a situation where you're like, oh, quick, let's get that sorted, stop, please stop, and think twice about what it is that's going on, because it might well be something that doesn't purport to be. They will commonly use things like urgency in there, try and provoke a response from you, a bit of scare tactics. No one wants to get in trouble for missing something at work, and that's the kind of thing that they're going to prey on. They also, most commonly, will have attachments on the emails, not necessarily, more, again, having links to payloads is very common, but we've seen a high percentage that come through with attachments. I don't know about you, my bank email to tell me that I have a statement ready, they do not attach the statement to the email. So, treat things with caution when they come through with points such as this. Other than a bit of a laugh, what does this slide teach us? It teaches us that education is everything when it comes to email security and phishing security. In fact, really cybersecurity in general. Train your teams and your colleagues in what to spot and what to be cautious of. Never assume that people automatically know. It's amazing how people, I find, react in a working environment, things that they would question naturally at home. But for some reason, when we come to work, strange things happen. We trust far more, I think, than we do in our own personal lives. Just an observation of mine. I haven't got any stats to back it up, but I do find that people are more susceptible to it when you see some of the, hindsight is obviously a wonderful thing, but when you unpick these things after the event and you go back through the email chains that originated in people sending money to people that weren't who they say they were and things, it's really obvious. But we take things at face value quite often in the workplace, and it's just helping people to be educated to ask, and if they're unsure, don't. And I find will go a very, very long way. Equally on that front, picking up the training again, training and reinforcement. I heard a phrase recently which I thought stuck with me, so I thought I'd share it, and that was patch the human. We talk about patching systems and installing updates, but when do we look out for ourselves? When do we teach people how to avoid the potholes and the bugs and the things that are going to get us into trouble, and keep repeating, repeat. And by that, please avoid having an annual session of dull PowerPoint, because we've all been in a box lifting lesson at some point, haven't we, of bend the knees and lift the box. It's not the most enthralling thing in the world, and try and give a little bit of urgency and make it a little bit fun with these things, and try and help people to take the information in rather than just sitting through a lesson of how to change your password. But do think that repetition is the only way to do it. Keep reiterating to people, never assume that people know what it is that they need to do. This excerpt comes from a report that was published this morning. I just added it in today. It's from a study that was commissioned via Webroot, the cybersecurity company, and Carnegie Mellon. I really like what it encapsulates, because the core of it is that we have to change our focus and the levels of importance that we place on security and data security, At the moment, I don't believe that they're enough. It's seen as a bit of an afterthought. I don't want to have to change my password every month. I find it frustrating. I don't want to have to use a second factor of authentication. Again, it's cumbersome. I just need to log in quickly. And if my password is the same as everything else, I can do that. And unfortunately, we often, we get what we pay for. What we focus on, I believe, gets done. And so by placing more importance there, so saying we have to allow the time and brain space for security related considerations, just focusing on it, making it something that we discuss in the workplace a little bit more, making it so that if you see a colleague who's left their computer unlocked, or you see an email that's come in that looks a bit weird, point it out, don't just walk past it. And impressing on people that if they're unsure, they can ask a question, I think will get us in a much better place than we are today. IT can't fix it all. And coming from somebody who works for an IT services company, of course, but it's the truth. There is no such thing as a silver bullet when it comes to fixing these things. Cyber criminals are looking to catch you on a bad day. They're looking to get you when you have more things to do than you can possibly achieve in the day. And that was before 9 o'clock. So you came in with plans that you knew you weren't going to finish. And that was before the storm started of the email floodgates opening and colleagues coming to ask you questions, and you're flat out. When you're flat out, you're vulnerable. And that's when they're going to get you. Expensive boxes and software can't stop people clicking on links that take them to places that aren't what they claim to be. And the last point I will pick up, rather than reading every bullet point out, I'm only going to focus on one here. Please never pay. Never, ever pay the ransom. If you get hit by a ransom or your data is there, we restore it from a backup. Never, ever pay them. By paying them, you are establishing a venture capital fund that funds better malware creation. It's that simple. You are paying them to become better at what it is that they do. You're telling them what they've done, A, works, and B, if they carry on at it, they're going to make more money. So please never, ever pay a cyber criminal anything. Report it to the police, write off whatever it is, and restore it. And if your backups, if the back of your mind you're thinking at the moment that I need to have a think about my backups and making sure that I have the ability to restore in a time frame that would be acceptable to me, that's a good thing to be thinking right now because it's extremely important. From a technical aspect as well, about never paying the ransom, when you're talking about malicious software, especially the type that is horrible and encrypts all your data, as we read about so often in the news these days, there is a feature to it which is called dwell time. And what it means by dwell time is the amount of time that software sits on a system before it lets you know it's there. And that average dwell time, from a piece of research I looked at recently, is now they reckon in excess from average malware of 90 days. So 90 days after the event of you actually getting infected is when it does something about it. And so by you paying a ransom, I would argue, number one, you become a very popular target. And if they have other bits of malware that they know are in your same network, then I'd be activating that one as well. So I think by paying, you're just making yourself known. And unfortunately, in this day and age, with dwell time on malware, it could be within your systems for a long time before you know anything about it. And as a result, you could get hit again. Right. So time for a recap. So first of all, passwords. Passwords, what we're going to do, we're going to change them. If you're using the same passwords everywhere, change them, make some different ones. Use a password manager to help you remember what they are. Even better, use a password manager to help you come up with ones that not even you know what they are, help you randomize them. Then we're going to use two-factor authentication wherever we can, be it on the personal services that we use and definitely the services that we use for our businesses. Make sure that people are logging in, they are who they say they are. And the only way we can do that is when we don't solely rely on a password, because as we've seen, passwords are vulnerable to becoming known by other people, especially in this day and age. Secondly, patching. First of all, just do it. That's the main thing. Update stuff, update systems, update software, update whatever you can. Don't suffer things that are not in date anymore, because those manufacturers are offering you fixes to your airbags every day of the week. Make sure you take advantage of what is being put out there. Make sure that you have the bits that are going to save you and make you completely immune to the viruses as they're coming out from people that are using those patches to reverse engineer and find the holes where they can target malicious software. If you can, and if it's available to you in your business, then automate it and have a system whereby patches are being installed on your behalf on a regular schedule. Email, check it, make sure it is what it claims to be, and if you are in any doubt, delete it and call the person who it claims to be from and verify that they sent it to you. We all start doing it, then I think we'll all be in a better place. And lastly, and I think most importantly, be aware. Don't trust what you see. Learn. Remember, it's Cybersecurity Month, European Cybersecurity Month. There's loads out there. There is absolutely loads. And by coming on something like this today, you're already learning, I hope. And you're already hopefully picking up better practices of what it is that you can do to avoid being impacted and your businesses from being impacted. And lastly, share. Talk to people. The more we bring it up, as I said earlier, a rising tide lifts all boats. And so by talking to other people about it, if you've got a really good way, or really, say for example, you've started using a password manager and you've got a hang of it, talk to a colleague about it, show them. The more people help each other, the better we will all be. So as a sort of fourth wildcard in there, I think the U part is probably by far the most important. So moving on to questions now. So just give me 1 second. I just have a look, 1 second. Right, we have a question coming here about spoofed emails. So we receive emails regularly, and is there a way of spotting emails that are not what they claim to be? Right, okay, a couple of good tips on this one. So first of all, one that I've seen working really, really well, and this is a good idea for emails where people are actually sending you emails that pretend to be from inside of your company. We've had a few of these recently. Our HR manager was showing me just last week, actually, ones that she received that were claiming to be from our managing director, that were asking her to order gift vouchers, and it was a dead giveaway from the email because he said, please, any denomination that you feel, or something. The language was all off. But of course, it looks as though it came from an internal recipient, so you might even be even more trusting of it than you would be a believing email from something that's come externally. There are ways and means of flagging emails. Talk to your either Complete IT or whoever manages your technology, in order to attach a banner to all emails that come in from an external source. So if they arrive from the outside world, even if they claim to come from your company's domain name, so from your email addresses, your.co.uk or .com, just stick a banner at the top saying that this email came from outside the organisation. Please exercise additional caution, or words to the effect. I think it's got a basic way of doing it, but it's very effective because it immediately puts you on the defensive. Because you are thinking, well, this came from outside the company. Well, if it came from and it's got our domain name written on it, then how could it have come from outside the company? Because that's not right. That's not how these things work. Second of all, as well, is filtering and email security. Don't want to go down any kind of product catalog today. So it's not what we're about. It's all about education. But there are a variety of means. First of all, of making sure that your emails are who they say they are. And are coming from who they say they are coming from. But second of all, there are solutions out there for obviously the stripping out and filtering of emails before you receive them, and having something in place that you can depend on, I think in this day and age is very important because of the amount of attacks that are coming in via email. Patching. Apps that require old versions of software and that you may not be able to get rid of. Okay, so as we spoke about earlier on, you have an application. It's very important to your business. It could be, say, an old finance package that has some legacy accounts in it, and it has to have certain things around it to make it operate properly, and to make it that now those things may have updates available to them, which unfortunately you can't avail yourselves of, because if you upgrade that one piece of software, then this core app will stop working. Unfortunately, there is no silver bullet for this one. Ultimately, either upgrading or retiring, I would say, is your safest bet. Worst case, have that piece of software in an isolated environment where it can't talk to the rest of your network. So, for example, that old finance package, we may have to put it onto a server that then can't talk to the rest of the network. Because if it can talk to it and it became breached, that breach could very easily spread and infect other machines on the network. So please be really, really careful. I do appreciate that it's very easy to sit here and say, oh, I'm afraid of its end of life, it's got to go. And that may not always be practical. But you do, I would say, at least have to have some idea of roadmap of how in your business you can move away from using whatever that is, be it having the data exported and imported into a new system or into some kind of archival so that you can restore it if you ever need it. But really, when you're stuck in a position where you can't update something, then there's not a lot you can do, because you are going to be vulnerable to the bugs that have been found in those pieces of software. Right, what do we got next? Plan for what happens if the worst happens. Right, so what happens if you get hit? What happens if, so you've come in one day and you've discovered that, say for example, you've been victim to a crypto style virus. So your files have been scrambled, you can't access them, and one of the computers on the network somewhere is going to have a banner on it that's asking you for money. First of all, start today by writing some sort of plan. I appreciate this doesn't have to be a technical plan, because you may not work in it or may not be involved in the technical side of your IT, but have a plan for who's going to call who and do what if that worst should happen. So who, for example, what are the departments that need to be up and running the fastest? Do you have any clients, customers that you would have to inform if your services were unavailable for whatever reason, because you might have delivery targets to hit with them because of the nature of the services that you provide to them? Know also in advance what your backup is, and know how recent the backup is that you can expect to restore. So if, for example, you fell victim to an attack now, how old would the backup be that you are restoring to replace those files that have been lost? Because as we spoke about earlier, please never pay the ransom. Also, what else are you doing other than restoring the backup and running to your plan? I would say please call the police, do inform them. Until we make this enough of a problem, it will never be recognised accordingly. I would place a bet that the vast majority of cyber incidents that occur, the police never find out, because people will either, it'll be the last thing on their mind, but please somebody inform the police that this has happened, because eventually it will get taken more seriously by UK law enforcement, and they will be able to have more powers and ultimately funding in order to be able to do more about it. When you get hit as well, so in your plan, I would also be detailing who's communicating externally, but also what are you communicating internally? If you have teams of people who are unable to work, do you have manual processes in place to say, right, for example, if the sales team no longer have access to their sales data, this is what the activity that we would like them to be performing. Because otherwise you're going to be very stuck, you're going to have a lot of things to do. And actually just having a set plan of what people can run to means that you are going to minimize the impact to the business. And last thing of what happens if you get hit, when things are back up and running, so we've gone through our plan, we've restored our backups, we've made sure that the infection's been removed from the network, from the machines, wherever it's coming from. The last thing to do is learn and change. So make sure there is some form of wash up. Make sure there is a decamp of this is what happened, this is how we were impacted. We know now why. That could be, for example, because we didn't have sufficient protection in this area, or because that area, by the way, may of course be training, may of course be people. And this is what we're going to do to stop it from happening again. As I said earlier with the NHS and with Wannacry, it's very regrettable with some of the trusts where they got hit by the same bug twice. And probably the main reason for that is because they were restoring backups that still weren't patched. So don't leave it to chance. Please learn from whatever happens. As horrible as it sounds, at least try and use it as a positive focus for change in the future of we need to make ourselves bigger and better and not get hit by this again. Next question, all the dreaded words, I'm afraid. No, not the one that begins with B. Instead, the 4 letters of GDPR and the implications of GDPR of cybersecurity infections. Okay, good one, because they are actually very intrinsically linked. So under GDPR, of course, is all about personal data, how we store personal data, how we access it, how we process it, and data controllers, data processors. And also very strongly baked throughout all of the articles is how we secure it and how we stop it from falling into hands that would use that data for reasons other than the reason that the subject gave it to you. So the reason that you are storing it in the first place. So first of all, would a cybersecurity incident, quote unquote, count as a breach of the GDPR? It would. As, for example, would a failure to restore from a backup, because that would mean that the data you were storing was unable to be put back in place, which would mean that you weren't storing it properly. So should it be reported? The reporting, I personally don't think it ever hurts to let the ICO know when things happen. I view the ICO as there to help. And if you engage with them, I think it's always a stronger place than trying to hide things from them. One thing is definitely for certain, if you were to suffer a minor incident relatively soon, and then say 2 years down the line to suffer a major incident. If it transpired during the investigations of the major incident that a minor incident was covered up, I don't think it would be looked on favourably. So I would say, when in doubt, it's good to let the Information Commissioner know. I believe that they want to be engaged with, and when you hear about all the doom and gloom and scary stories and things in the news, that's more when I think people are trying to keep them out and block them. So I would engage with them wherever possible. Again, this comes back to what I said, actually dovetails quite well with what I said at the beginning about the National Cybersecurity Centre report. And it comes back to demonstrate in the good times that you are preparing for what may happen. Because in this day and age, when we're hearing about university college hospitals in America getting hit by viruses, we're learning about cities in America sending $500,000 off to people as a result of phishing emails, it can happen. And it doesn't matter what your quote unquote budget is, it doesn't discriminate. So preparing in the good times. So as I said earlier, with the National Cybersecurity Centre report, distributing it, discussing it at the top level of the company to show that the company takes data security and places importance in it, and then noting minutes from that discussion and any actions that came off the back of it, I think puts you in a really, really good place and a much stronger place to say, look, we tried and we were really taking this seriously and we were discussing it at the top level of the business, etc. So having that level of engagement around your cybersecurity, I think, can benefit you if the worst were to happen with the GDPR. But yes, please know that with data breaches and data incidents, effectively, the data you're holding will most likely relate to either your own team members or to your customers, clients. And that data, of course, is exactly what the GDPR was invented for. So when it's being either deleted, removed, encrypted, the worst, stolen by some kind of infection, that could land you potentially into a lot of trouble with the authorities. I think that about brings us to an end then. I've got a couple of minutes over. So first of all, I would like to say a big thank you to you all for joining us today. I hope you found it beneficial. It goes without saying that if you have any follow-up questions to this, I do apologise, I haven't managed to get around to all the questions in the webinar, but I want people to have a little bit of a lunch break left before they go back. Then please, by all means, get in touch with us. info@complete-it.co.uk, inquiries at complete-it.co.uk, or if you do obviously are a client of Complete IT already, then please just contact your account manager or any of the team here at CIT, and they can make sure that your inquiry finds it to the right place. And thank you. I think, as I said earlier, please share what you've learned, take something away. Remember, we're going to be looking at your passwords, change the user password manager, looking at patching, updates of things on your computer, and be careful what comes in via email. There are lots of resources out there. It's Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So please make the most of it. And thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you.